So we've seen that Confucianism can certainly have elements that appear to be religious, but some of you may still be feeling that altogether it just doesn't have the whole feeling of being a religion. There's still something missing. The administrative side of a religion is one thing, the kind of religious organization, but maybe some real deep personal sense of cosmic transformation that's necessary for us to really think that there's some deep religious content. Maybe that's what's missing. And so I want to get into a little bit of that. I'm just going to talk a little bit briefly about this, and what I want you to do is to really get into the material on your own time, and then when we get to class, we'll be able to have a much deeper discussion of the material itself. But the first part is going to come from a text called Doctrine of the Mean, or Centrality and Commonality. It's a text that was written approximately 2,000 years ago, so it's a little bit after the time of Confucius. It was always an important text in the Confucian tradition. It made it into one of the 5 Confucian classics. But about 1,000 years ago, there was a revitalization of Confucianism called Neo-Confucianism that we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And it becomes a very prominent text in that particular reorganization of Confucianism because it has tremendous spiritual depth. I just want to highlight a couple things, and then you can read it carefully. There's not a lot of text for you to look at, but I want you to think about it carefully. The first part is talking about sincerity, but it says sincerity is the way of heaven, and to think how to be sincere is the way of man. He who is sincere is one who has hit upon what is right without effort and apprehends without thinking. He is naturally and easily in harmony with the way. Such a man is a sage. And then it says, he who tries to be sincere is one who chooses the good and holds fast to it. So there's some sense here of a kind of transformation where you become a sage. Confucius is regarded as a sage. Few people in history win the full designation of a sage, but the idea is that it is possible to transform yourself so fully that you become really the highest potential that a human being has, that you fully are able to realize that and have a tremendous impact on human civilization. And I want you to think about what it means to hit upon what is right without effort and apprehend without thinking. Think about how that relates to what we talked about in the Taoist tradition and see, is there some connection there? So that's the first passage I want you to think about from this text, the Doctrine of the Mean, or Centrality and Commonality. And then it has some material here which talks about connecting in a cosmic kind of way. So not just the human self-perfection aspect, but really forming a trinity with heaven and earth. So, you're going to read this material yourself, but think about what it means to transform yourself to such a degree that you not only win the designation of sage, but form a trinity with heaven and earth and assist heaven and earth in its transforming and nourishing processes. What does that mean exactly, and is it religious? Okay, so we'll talk about that in class. We won't get very deeply into this particular diagram, but it really is a good representation of what happens in the Confucian tradition starting approximately the 12th century. And we see that in China, Buddhism and Taoism have become very fully developed, and it's a period where Confucianism is going to draw heavily on those two traditions that most people are going to have no problem saying is religious. And so, in this case, we have a kind of Taoist cosmology where the Tao is the empty nothingness from which all things come. We talked a bit about that in the last lecture. And this is a different way of drawing a yin-yang symbol. So the Tao flows into the world as yin and yang, and it combines in some very complicated ways, and we end up with the universe. But this is also a way to kind of trace that back to the stillness of the Tao, and to connect with the Tao in a way that also seems to be a bit Taoist. And so this becomes something important in Neo-Confucianism. And so, again, that self-cultivation where it's got a deeper spiritual component than just trying to be a good person. It's about trying to go back to the origins of the universe, to the force through which things are constantly being created, the Tao, to somehow connect directly with the Tao. Again, that sounds like the kind of thing that we're talking about with religion. And then here's a nice statement. You can read it on your own, but it talks about through this process we can learn to become much more connected with the cosmos, not just human society, but at a cosmic level. And these are the kinds of things that I would suggest give Confucianism this significant religious dimension. It's not just about human morality. It's not just about making society a good place. It's about considering the processes of yin and yang through which the world is brought into continual creation and harmonizing with those to the point where one might actually form a trinity with them. That seems to me to be something significantly religious.